My name is Maeve and I am 32 years old. Right now, I am sitting in my own apartment watching the morning light pour through the window, and everything feels peaceful. But a year ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. I thought 6 years of love meant something unbreakable. I was wrong. One anniversary party changed everything. One toast, one cheap t-shirt, and suddenly I saw my husband for who he really was. Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if stories about finding your strength after betrayal speak to you, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me take you back to that night, the night I discovered who my husband really was, and more importantly, who I really am. I had been working as a graphic designer at an advertising firm in Chicago for almost 8 years. My days were filled with deadlines, client meetings, and endless revisions, but I loved the creative energy of my job. I often stayed late at the office perfecting every detail of a campaign, making sure every color and font was exactly right. My colleagues knew me as someone reliable, someone who would always deliver quality work, even under pressure. Outside of work, I was the kind of person who found joy in simple things. On weekends, I would spend hours in my small kitchen experimenting with new recipes. There was something meditative about chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, and watching a meal come together. I also had a tiny balcony where I grew herbs and a few flowering plants. Tending to them in the early morning coffee in hand was my quiet ritual. At night before sleep, I would read a few chapters of whatever novel had caught my attention that month. These small pleasures made my life feel full, but there was a part of me that I had trouble recognizing back then. I was always putting others first. If a friend needed help moving, I was there. If a colleague was overwhelmed with work, I took on extra tasks without being asked. If my husband wanted something done a certain way, I adjusted without question. I thought this made me a good person, a good wife. I did not realize I was slowly erasing myself. My husband Derek was 35 when all of this happened. He worked as a sales manager for a software company, and he was good at his job. He had a way of talking to people that made them feel important, at least when he wanted to. He was tall with brown hair that he kept neatly styled and a smile that could light up a room. That smile was what first attracted me to him when we met at a mutual friend's birthday party 7 years before our anniversary. In the beginning, Derek was everything I had dreamed of. He would surprise me with flowers for no reason. He planned elaborate dates, taking me to restaurants I had mentioned wanting to try months earlier. He remembered every small detail I shared with him and used that knowledge to make me feel seen and cherished. When he proposed after a year of dating, I said yes without hesitation. I believed I had found my partner for life. But people change, or maybe they just reveal who they always were. Over the past 2 years before that anniversary, I noticed shifts in Derek that I tried hard to ignore. He became critical in ways that felt unnecessary. If I cooked dinner, he would compare it unfavorably to his mother's cooking. If I bought a new dress, he would ask why I chose that style instead of something more flattering. When I got promoted at work, instead of celebrating with me, he asked who would handle the housework now that I would be busier. I made excuses for him constantly. He was stressed from work. His company was going through a difficult transition. His mother was putting pressure on him about something. There was always a reason why his unkind words were not really his fault. I bent myself into shapes trying to understand him, never stopping to ask why I was the one always bending. His mother, Linda, had never warmed to me. She was a woman who believed her son deserved the best of everything, and somehow I never quite measured up in her eyes. She would visit our home and comment on dust she spotted on a shelf, or mention that Derek looked thinner and ask if I was feeding him properly. Once during a family dinner, she told me I was lucky that Derek had chosen me. She said it with a smile, but the meaning was clear. I was beneath her son. My own parents lived in Wisconsin about 4 hours away. They were kind, supportive people who never interfered in my marriage. But my mother had a way of asking questions that showed she saw more than I wanted her to see. "Are you happy?" she would ask during our phone calls. Really happy, I always assured her I was fine. I did not want to worry her, and I was not ready to admit that her concerns might be valid. My younger sister Chloe was 28 and lived in the city about 30 minutes from my apartment. She was single, fiercely independent, and had never liked Derek. She thought he was arrogant and dismissive. Whenever we got together for coffee or lunch, she would probe gently, asking how things were at home. I always defended Derek to her, insisting she just did not understand him. Looking back, I realized she understood him perfectly. I was the one who refused to see. Then there was Jenna, my best friend from college. We had been through everything together, from late-night study sessions to heartbreaks to career struggles. She worked at a bank downtown, and we tried to meet for dinner at least twice a month. Jenna was diplomatic about Derek. She never criticized him directly, but I could see concern in her eyes when I told her about his comments. She would squeeze my hand and tell me I deserved to be appreciated. I wish I had listened to her sooner. At work, I had a colleague named Marcus, who had become a good friend over the years. We were both designers on the same team, and we spent countless hours collaborating on projects. Marcus was easy to talk to, and he had a gift for making stressful situations feel manageable. I never discussed my marriage with him in detail, but he seemed to sense when I was having a hard time. He would bring me coffee without asking or offer to take on part of my workload. His kindness meant more than he knew. This was my life in the months before our 6th anniversary. A job I loved, people who cared about me, and a marriage that I was trying desperately to believe was still good. I had no idea that a single evening would shatter everything I thought I knew. The idea for the anniversary party came from Derek. He suggested we celebrate 6 years of marriage by hosting a gathering at our home, inviting family and close friends. At first, I was thrilled. We had not done anything special together in a long time, and I thought this party could be a turning point, a chance for us to reconnect and remember why we fell in love. We decided to invite around 30 people, both sets of parents, siblings, some aunts and uncles, and friends from work and life. Derek seemed excited about the planning, which made me hopeful. Maybe he was finally coming back to me, the attentive man I had married. But as the weeks passed, I realized that I was doing all the preparation alone. Derek said he had important meetings with clients and could not take time off. He assured me he would help on the day of the party, but that day never came. I found myself cleaning our entire home from top to bottom, organizing every room until it sparkled. I spent hours planning the menu, choosing dishes I knew our guests would enjoy. I decided to cook everything myself: a roasted chicken with herbs, a fresh garden salad, homemade rolls, and a lemon cheesecake for dessert. I wanted the food to feel personal, made with love, rather than ordered from a caterer. I also ordered flowers for the living room, choosing arrangements in soft pinks and whites that I thought would create a warm atmosphere. A week before the party, I went shopping for something new to wear. I found a navy blue dress that fit perfectly elegant but not overdone. As I tried it on in the dressing room, I imagined Derek's face when he saw me in it. I imagined him telling me I looked beautiful. I bought the dress with a flutter of anticipation in my chest. The gift I prepared for Derek took months of planning. 6 months earlier, we had been walking past a jewelry store when he stopped to admire a watch in the window. It was classic and sophisticated, exactly his style. He mentioned how much he liked it, then shrugged and said, "Maybe someday." I made a mental note and started saving money from each paycheck. By our anniversary, I had enough to buy it. But the watch was not all. I also created a photo album by hand, selecting pictures from every year of our relationship. Our first date, our wedding day vacations. We had taken ordinary moments that captured our life together. I spent evenings after work arranging the photos and writing captions beneath each one. And finally, I wrote him a letter. 3 pages front and back, filled with all the reasons I loved him and my hopes for our future together. I sealed it in an envelope and placed it with the other gifts hidden in my closet where he would not find them. The morning of the party, I woke at 5 to begin preparations. The house was quiet as I started cooking, the smell of roasting chicken slowly filling the kitchen. I set the table with our nicest dishes and folded napkins carefully at each place setting. I arranged the flowers in vases and placed candles around the living room. Every detail mattered to me. I wanted this night to be perfect. Derek woke up around 10. He shuffled into the kitchen, still half asleep, and looked around at all the work I had done. His first words were a question about coffee, asking where I had put his favorite mug. I pointed to the cabinet and continued slicing vegetables for the salad. He poured himself a cup and sat at the counter, scrolling through his phone. He did not offer to help. He did not comment on how the house looked or the food I was preparing. But I told myself it did not matter. Tonight would change everything. Guests began arriving around 6 in the evening. My parents came early, my mother immediately rolling up her sleeves to help me with last-minute tasks. My father complimented the decorations and gave me a warm hug. They were always my steady ground, and having them there made me feel calmer. Then Derek's family arrived. His mother, Linda, walked in and surveyed the room with a critical eye. She noted that the flowers I had chosen were rather simple, were they not? Her daughter, Nicole, Derek's younger sister, nodded in agreement. They settled onto the sofa and waited to be served drinks. I smiled and brought them glasses of wine, reminding myself that tonight was about celebration, not confrontation. Jenna arrived with her new boyfriend, a kind man named Tyler who worked in finance. She found me in the kitchen and wrapped me in a hug, telling me I looked absolutely stunning in my blue dress. Her words meant everything. She helped me arrange appetizers on platters while we caught up on each other's lives. Derek's co-workers filtered in throughout the evening. I did not know most of them well, just faces I recognized from company events. They gathered around Derek in the living room, laughing at his jokes and refilling their glasses. He was in his element, charming and confident, the center of attention. My sister Chloe arrived last, rushing in with an apology about traffic. She hugged me tightly and whispered that I looked amazing. Then she glanced toward the living room where Derek was holding court, and her expression shifted. She did not say anything, but I could read her thoughts. She never trusted him, and she never hid it well. The party moved along smoothly. Guests mingled, the food was received with compliments, and the atmosphere felt festive. I moved between groups, making sure everyone had what they needed, rarely sitting down myself. Derek stayed mostly in one spot, surrounded by his admirers, occasionally catching my eye and raising his glass in acknowledgement. I kept looking at the clock, waiting for the right moment. Soon Derek would give his toast. Soon I would present my gifts to him. Soon this night would become the memory I was hoping for. I had no idea what was actually coming. Around 9 o'clock, the party was in full swing. The living room hummed with conversation and laughter. Plates of food had been cleared, and guests were relaxed, drinks in hand, enjoying the evening. I was standing near the kitchen doorway, finally taking a moment to catch my breath, when Derek clinked a fork against his wine glass. The room gradually quieted. Faces turned toward him, expectant and smiling. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I smoothed my dress and moved closer, positioning myself where I could see him clearly. My heart swelled with anticipation. After all the tension of the past months, maybe tonight Derek would remind me why I had fallen in love with him. He cleared his throat dramatically, playing to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying that confident salesman tone he used so well. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate 6 wonderful years of marriage to my lovely wife, Maeve." Applause rippled through the room. I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my chest. This was it. This was the Derek I remembered. 6 years with Maeve, he continued, pausing for effect. 6 years has taught me many things. He took a sip of his wine, and something in his expression shifted. Something I did not recognize at first. Mainly, he said, it has taught me patience. A few people chuckled uncertainly. I felt my smile falter, but held it in place. You see, Derek went on, warming to his subject. Maeve is many things. She is hard-working, which is good because someone has to scrub the bathroom. More laughter this time, more comfortable. I noticed Linda nodding approvingly. And her cooking, Derek said, shaking his head with exaggerated weariness. It is certainly unique. Remember that time she set off the smoke alarm making toast? He looked around the room, inviting everyone to share in the joke. I stood frozen. My face was burning. I remembered that incident. It happened during our first month of marriage. The toaster had malfunctioned. It was not even my fault, but Derek had never let me forget it. He continued, and I have to give Maeve credit. She keeps trying new recipes all the time. Some of them are even edible. His co-workers laughed loudly at this. I saw one of them elbow another, both grinning as if this were the funniest thing they had heard all night. But in all seriousness, Derek said, and I felt a flicker of hope that he was about to turn things around. In all seriousness, I am a lucky man. Because who else would put up with a wife who leaves clothes everywhere, forgets to buy groceries, and takes forever to get ready? He spread his hands as if to say, "What can you do?" The room was quiet now, that uncomfortable silence that falls when people are not sure how to react. I searched the faces around me. My mother's expression was stricken. My father's jaw was tight with controlled anger. Chloe looked ready to explode, her hands clenched at her sides. Jenna met my eyes with such sorrow that I had to look away. But Derek was not finished. You know, he mused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. I sometimes wonder how Maeve would manage without me. He laughed at his own words. I mean, she used to be able to fit into her wedding dress. Good times, right? Linda laughed loudly, that sharp barking sound she made when she found something genuinely amusing. Nicole joined in her giggles, high and mean. Some of Derek's co-workers chuckled along, though a few shifted uncomfortably. I stood there, unable to move, unable to speak. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My eyes stung with tears I refused to let fall. This could not be happening. Not here. Not now. Not in front of everyone I cared about. But hey, Derek concluded, raising his glass. I kid because I love. To my wife, Maeve. Here is to 6 more years of patience. People raised their glasses awkwardly. The toast was drunk in near silence. I lifted my own glass mechanically, the wine tasting like ash on my tongue. Then Derek reached behind the sofa and pulled out a small paper bag. And now, he announced, for my anniversary gift to my beautiful bride. I walked toward him, my legs feeling disconnected from my body. He handed me the bag with a flourish. "Open it," he urged. "I picked this out, especially for you." I reached inside and pulled out a white t-shirt. Cheap cotton, the kind you buy in a pack of 3 at a discount store. Printed on the front in a garish, uneven font were the words, "Best wife ever." The room was dead silent. I stared at the shirt, then at Derek, then back at the shirt. This was it. This was his gift to me after 6 years of marriage. After 6 years of cooking his meals, washing his clothes, supporting his career, loving him through his moods and criticisms. A t-shirt that probably cost less than the appetizers I had spent hours preparing. Linda broke the silence. "Well, that is practical," she said approvingly. "Maeve does not need anything fancy anyway." I looked up and met Derek's eyes. He was smiling, genuinely pleased with himself. He had no idea what he had just done. Or maybe he did, and that was worse. Somewhere in my peripheral vision, I saw Chloe start to move toward us, her face flushed with anger. I caught her eye and shook my head slightly. Not here, not now. I forced my lips into a smile. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "It is very thoughtful." The rest of the party passed in a blur. People resumed their conversations, but the energy had shifted. There were sympathetic glances cast my way, whispered exchanges behind hands. My parents hugged me tightly before they left my mother's eyes filled with tears she was trying to hide. Chloe squeezed my arm and said she would call me first thing in the morning. Jenna held me for a long moment and whispered, "You are stronger than you know." Eventually, everyone was gone. Derek, thoroughly drunk by now, stumbled to the bedroom and passed out fully clothed on top of the covers. I stood alone in my beautifully decorated living room, surrounded by the remnants of the party I had worked so hard to create. The photo album I had made sat unopened in my closet. The watch I had saved for months to buy was still in its box. The letter I had poured my heart into remained sealed. Derek had not given me a chance to present any of it. He'd been too busy tearing me down to notice that I had been trying to lift us up. I picked up the t-shirt from where it lay crumpled on a chair. best wife ever. The irony burned like acid. I had tried so hard to be exactly that, and this was what I received in return. That night, something broke inside me, but something else was beginning to wake up. I did not sleep that night. After the last guest left and Derek collapsed into unconsciousness, I sat alone in the living room for hours. The candles had burned down to stubs. The flowers I had arranged so carefully seemed to mock me now, their cheerful colors out of place against the heaviness in my chest. I replayed the evening in my mind, every word Derek had said, every laugh from his mother, every pitying glance from friends and family. I kept waiting for the moment when I would wake up and realize this had all been a nightmare. But morning light eventually crept through the windows, and I was still there, still awake, still married to a man who had humiliated me for entertainment. When Derek finally stumbled out of the bedroom around noon, he looked exactly like someone with a massive hangover. He shuffled to the kitchen, poured himself coffee, and sat at the counter scrolling through his phone. He did not mention the party. He did not ask how I was feeling. It was as if the previous night had never happened. Eventually, he looked up. "Hey," he said casually, "why did you not make breakfast? I am starving." I stared at him. "After everything you said last night, you are asking me about breakfast." He frowned, genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" "What did I say?" "You're toast." "Derek, in front of everyone. You humiliated me." He laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, come on, Maeve, that was just jokes. Everyone was laughing. You are being way too sensitive." I was not being sensitive. I had spent years being not sensitive enough. I had allowed his casual cruelties to accumulate like snowflakes, each one small and easy to dismiss, until I was buried in a blizzard I could no longer ignore. "No one was laughing," I said quietly. "Not really." He rolled his eyes. "My mom thought it was hilarious. So did my coworkers. It is not my fault you cannot take a joke. Maybe if you lightened up a little, you would be more fun to be around." His phone buzzed and his attention shifted immediately. He picked it up, glanced at the screen, and his expression flickered with something I could not quite read. He typed a quick response, then pocketed the phone. "I need to run some errands," he announced. "We can talk later if you want, but honestly, Maeve, I think you are making a big deal out of nothing." He left. I sat alone in the kitchen, his words echoing in my head. Too sensitive. Cannot take a joke. Making a big deal out of nothing. I had heard variations of these phrases for years, and I had always accepted them. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I did need to lighten up. But not this time. This time something felt different. This time I was angry. That afternoon, I was tidying the living room when I heard Derek's phone buzz on the kitchen counter. He had forgotten it in his hurry to leave. My first instinct was to ignore it, respect his privacy, wait for him to return. But then I saw the notification on the screen, a text message from someone named S. The preview showed just a few words. "Last night was fun. Miss you already." My hands trembled as I picked up the phone. I knew his passcode, a combination of his birthday and jersey number from high school football. I told myself I should not look. I told myself this was crossing a line. Then I remembered him standing in our living room calling me fat in front of our families, and I unlocked the phone. The messages between Derek and S went back 8 months. S was actually Sabrina, a name I recognized. She worked at his company in marketing. She had been at the party last night, a pretty brunette who had stayed close to Derek's group most of the evening. I had noticed her, but thought nothing of it. She was just a coworker. But she was not just a coworker. The messages made that painfully clear. Intimate exchanges, plans to meet at hotels, complaints about me. Derek had written things that made my stomach turn. "My wife is so boring," one message read. "All she does is work and cook. You are so much more exciting." Another said, "I cannot wait until I can be with you openly. Just need to sort out the finances first." Finances. He was planning to leave me, but only after he had positioned himself to come out ahead in a divorce. The affair was not impulsive. It was calculated. He had been deceiving me for most of a year while I cooked his meals, washed his clothes, and tried desperately to save our marriage. I sat down heavily, the phone still in my hands. The world had shifted on its axis. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. The criticism, the coldness, the constant belittling. It all made sense now. He had checked out of our marriage long ago. He had just been too cowardly to tell me. For a long moment, I could not breathe. The betrayal was overwhelming, a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Tears streamed down my face, but they were different from the tears I had swallowed the night before. These were not tears of humiliation. These were tears of rage. I could confront him when he walked through the door. I could scream and throw things and demand explanations. Part of me wanted exactly that, the cathartic release of finally expressing everything I had suppressed for so long. But another part of me, a cooler and more calculating part, had a different idea. Derek had spent years undermining me, making me feel small, positioning himself as the one in control. If I confronted him now, emotional and unprepared, he would find a way to turn it around on me. He would call me crazy, jealous, hysterical. He would make me the villain. No, I was not going to give him that satisfaction. I was going to be smart. I was going to be strategic. And when the time came, I was going to make sure he understood exactly what he had lost. I wiped my eyes, screenshot every incriminating message, and placed the phone back on the counter exactly where I had found it. When Derek came home that evening, I smiled and asked about his day. He had no idea that everything had changed. I called Chloe that night after Derek fell asleep. I sat in the bathroom with the door locked, whispering into the phone, telling her everything I had discovered. She was silent for a long moment after I finished. "I knew it," she finally said. "I knew something was wrong with him." "Maeve, you have to get out." I know I replied, "But I need to do this right. I cannot just react emotionally and let him control the narrative." Chloe understood immediately. She had always been the practical one in our family, the one who thought 3 steps ahead. "Okay," she said. "So we make a plan." The next morning, while Derek was at work, I researched divorce lawyers. I found one who specialized in cases involving infidelity and had excellent reviews from women who had been in situations similar to mine. Her name was Patricia Okonkwo, and when I called her office, they scheduled me for a consultation that same week. Meeting Patricia changed everything. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She listened as I explained my situation, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "You are doing the right thing by planning ahead," she told me. "Too many women in your position react impulsively and end up at a disadvantage. We are going to make sure that does not happen to you." She explained my rights, the division of property laws in Illinois, the impact that evidence of infidelity could have on proceedings. Our house had been purchased jointly, and we had shared savings and investments. Derek had been slowly siphoning money into a personal account, which Patricia assured me we could address in court. "Your job right now," she said, "is to document everything and appear normal. Do not let him know you are preparing to leave until we have all our pieces in place." I threw myself into the task. I screenshot every message between Derek and Sabrina, saving them to a secure cloud folder. I went through our financial records, making copies of bank statements, investment accounts, and credit card bills. I discovered transactions I had never noticed before. Expensive dinners, hotel charges, jewelry purchases that had never made their way to me. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances at home. I cooked dinner. I made small talk about our days. I lay beside Derek at night while he slept, planning my escape. It felt like living underwater, moving through a world that looked normal on the surface, while everything beneath was turbulent and dark. Jenna became my anchor during those months. I told her everything, and she responded with the fierce loyalty that had defined our friendship since college. She helped me search for apartments, spending her lunch breaks, scrolling through listings and texting me options. Eventually, we found a place, a 1-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with good light and a reasonable rent. I paid the deposit in cash money I had been quietly setting aside from each paycheck. At work, I focused on being excellent. I took on challenging projects and delivered results that impressed my supervisors. When my manager mentioned that a senior designer position was opening up, I expressed interest immediately. If I was going to start over, I wanted to do it from a position of strength. Marcus noticed that something was different about me. He did not pry, but he made small gestures of support. An extra coffee delivered to my desk. An offer to handle a difficult client call so I could leave on time. Once, after a particularly late night finishing a project, he walked me to my car and said, "I do not know what is going on, but I hope you know you deserve good things." I almost cried. Instead, I thanked him and drove home to my husband, who did not notice I had been gone for 12 hours. 3 months passed like this. 3 months of smiling when I wanted to scream, of playing the dutiful wife while I dismantled my marriage from the inside out. Derek never suspected a thing. He was too absorbed in his own deceptions to notice mine. Patricia called me one afternoon to say that everything was ready. The divorce papers were prepared. My apartment was waiting. I had documented enough of Derek's affair and financial manipulation to ensure a fair settlement. All that was left was choosing the moment to act. Derek's 36th birthday fell on a Saturday in early October, exactly 3 months after our disastrous anniversary. His mother insisted on hosting a dinner at her house, and Derek, of course, agreed enthusiastically. He loved being celebrated. What he did not know was that I had chosen this occasion for my exit. The symmetry appealed to me. He had humiliated me at our anniversary party in front of everyone we knew. Now I would reveal his true nature in front of everyone he cared about. The guest list included Linda Nicole, several of Derek's aunts and uncles, and a handful of his close friends, and Sabrina. Derek had invited her, claiming she was a valued colleague, and it would be rude to exclude her. I smiled and said of course she should come. Inside, I was counting down the hours. I spent the morning of the party preparing, not cooking this time. Linda had insisted on handling the food herself, making pointed comments about how she wanted things done properly. Instead, I prepared myself. I chose a red dress, bold and confident, the opposite of the shrinking woman I had been for years. I styled my hair, applied makeup carefully, and looked at myself in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. She was not the Maeve who apologized for existing. She was not the Maeve who bent herself into shapes to please everyone else. She was someone new, someone ready. We arrived at Linda's house at 6. The living room was decorated with balloons and streamers, all in Derek's favorite colors. Guests milled about, drinks in hand, waiting for the birthday boy to hold court. Derek moved through the room, accepting congratulations and compliments, basking in the attention. I spotted Sabrina near the fireplace, looking uncomfortable. Good. She should be uncomfortable. She had helped destroy my marriage while smiling to my face. I wondered if she had any idea what was coming. Dinner was served at 7. Linda had prepared a roast with all the trimmings, and she spent much of the meal reminding everyone how much effort it had required. Derek sat at the head of the table like a king, Sabrina positioned just 2 seats away. I sat quietly, eating little, waiting for the right moment. It came during dessert. Linda brought out a cake she had baked herself, and everyone sang happy birthday. Derek made a wish and blew out the candles, looking around the table with satisfaction. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, "This is perfect. I have the best family in the world." I set down my fork. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room, "I have something I would like to say." Derek looked surprised but gestured magnanimously. "Sure, babe. Go ahead." I stood up. My heart was racing, but my hands were steady. Everyone's eyes turned toward me. "I want to start by talking about our anniversary 3 months ago," I began. Derek gave a wonderful toast that night. He talked about how much patience it takes to be married to me. He mentioned my cooking and my weight and all the ways I fall short of being a perfect wife. Derek's smile flickered. "Maeve," he said warningly. "Let me finish," I said calmly. He also gave me a gift. A T-shirt. Cheap, ugly, thoughtless. That was what 6 years of marriage was worth to him. A T-shirt from a discount bin. Now the room was completely silent. Linda's face had gone pale. Nicole was staring at her plate. At the time, I continued. I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was too sensitive like Derek always tells me. But then I found out the truth. I turned to look directly at Sabrina. Her face had gone white. "Hello, Sabrina." I smiled pleasantly. "Or should I call you S? That is what Derek calls you in his text messages. Is it not Derek shot to his feet? Maeve, stop this right now. 8 months, I said, ignoring him. 8 months of messages, hotel rooms, expensive gifts. While I was home cooking your dinners and washing your clothes, you were planning how to leave me once you had sorted out the finances. I believe those were your exact words." The room erupted. Linda was shouting something about disrespect. Nicole looked like she wanted to disappear. Derek's aunts and uncles were exchanging shocked glances, and Derek himself stood frozen, his face cycling through expressions of rage, fear, and desperation. Sabrina grabbed her purse and fled toward the door. No one tried to stop her. "I am not finished," I said, and something in my voice made everyone quiet again. "I want Derek to know that I have already filed for divorce. My lawyer has copies of all the messages, all the financial records showing how you have been hiding money, everything. You will be hearing from her on Monday." I reached into my purse and pulled out the t-shirt, the one he had given me at our anniversary. I had kept it folded neatly, waiting for this moment. "Here," I said, laying it on the table in front of him. "You can give this to your next wife. I do not need it anymore." Then I turned to Linda, who was sputtering with outrage. "Thank you," I said sweetly, "for 6 years of reminding me that I was not good enough for your son. You were right. I deserve so much better than this." I picked up my purse and walked out of the house. No one followed me. No one tried to stop me. My car was parked at the curb. I got in, started the engine, and drove away from that house, that family, that life. In my rearview mirror, I could see figures emerging onto the porch, but I did not look back. 20 minutes later, I pulled up to my new apartment. The lights were on inside. Chloe and Jenna were waiting for me just as we had planned. When I walked through the door, they wrapped me in their arms. Jenna had brought pizza. Chloe had brought wine. We sat together on my secondhand couch in my empty living room, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I cried that night. Of course I did. 6 years of my life had just ended in spectacular fashion. But even through the tears, I felt something I had not experienced in a long time. Freedom, relief, the strange, unexpected lightness of finally telling the truth. The weeks after I left Derek were difficult in ways I had anticipated and ways I had not. There were nights when I woke up reaching for someone who was not there, moments when I forgot and expected to hear his key in the lock. The silence of my apartment sometimes felt like a physical weight, but it also felt like peace. I started seeing a therapist, a gentle woman named Dr. Reyes, who helped me understand how I had lost myself in my marriage. We talked about the gradual erosion of my self-worth, how Derek's constant criticism had conditioned me to believe I was never enough. We talked about why I had ignored the warning signs, why I had stayed so long. "You were not weak," Dr. Reyes told me during one session. "You were hopeful. There is nothing wrong with hoping someone will change. The strength is in recognizing when they will not." The divorce proceedings moved faster than I expected. Derek initially tried to fight, claiming I had misunderstood the messages that Sabrina was just a friend. But confronted with the evidence Patricia had compiled, his lawyer advised him to settle. Within 4 months, it was final. I walked out of the courthouse on a cold February afternoon, divorce papers in my hand, and felt the last chains fall away. My career flourished during this period. The senior designer position I had applied for became mine, a recognition of the work I had poured myself into, while my marriage crumbled. My new title came with a raise that allowed me to move into a larger apartment, one with a real balcony where I could garden, and a second bedroom that I turned into a studio for personal projects. I started painting again, something I had abandoned years ago when Derek dismissed it as a waste of time. I took a class at a community center on Saturday mornings, surrounded by other people rediscovering their creativity. My paintings were not masterpieces, but they were mine, and that was enough. I traveled for the first time as an adult, on my own. A weekend trip to the coast, just me and my thoughts and the sound of waves. I ate meals alone at restaurants, read books on park benches, wandered through museums without anyone rushing me. I discovered that I was actually good company for myself. My relationships deepened in unexpected ways. I went home to Wisconsin, more often spending long weekends with my parents. My mother and I would cook together, and she would tell me stories about her own life challenges she had faced and overcome. My father would take me on walks through the neighborhood where I grew up, pointing out what had changed and what had stayed the same. They never said "I told you so" about Derek. They just welcomed me home. Chloe and I became closer than ever. She would come to my apartment with takeout containers and terrible movies, and we would laugh until our stomachs hurt. Jenna and I maintained our dinner tradition, though now our conversations were different. She no longer had to ask carefully worded questions about my marriage. We could talk about anything, everything, nothing at all. I did not date for a long time. I needed to learn who I was outside of a relationship first. I needed to rebuild the parts of myself that had atrophied during 6 years of being told I was not enough. But eventually, I started to feel ready. Not desperate, not searching, just open to possibility. There were setbacks. Days when the loneliness felt crushing. Moments when I doubted every decision I had made. But those moments passed, and what remained was an increasing sense of my own resilience. I had survived something I once thought would destroy me, and I had emerged stronger. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Derek and Sabrina broke up within 6 months. Apparently, once the excitement of secrecy was gone, they discovered they did not actually like each other very much. Derek had to sell the house we had shared because he could not afford the payments on his own. Last I heard, he had moved into a small apartment and was telling everyone who would listen that I had ruined his life. I felt nothing when I heard that news. Not satisfaction, not anger, not sadness. Just a peaceful indifference. He was a chapter of my story that had ended, and I was too busy writing new chapters to dwell on old ones. One morning, about a year after the night I walked out of Linda's house, I sat in my apartment with a cup of coffee watching the sun rise over the city. My plants were thriving on the balcony. A half-finished painting waited for me in my studio. My phone held messages from people who loved me. I thought about the woman I had been a year earlier. Broken, humiliated, desperate to believe in a marriage that was already dead. I wanted to reach back through time and hold her hand. I wanted to tell her that the worst night of her life was actually the beginning of the best chapter. But she could not hear me. She had to walk the path herself, had to feel every step of the journey. And she had. She had survived. She had grown. She had become me. The lesson I carry with me now is simple, but hard-won. Never let anyone convince you that you are not worthy of respect, of kindness, of love. If someone shows you who they really are, if they dismiss you and belittle you and make you feel small, believe them. Do not wait for them to change. Do not twist yourself into shapes trying to earn something that should be freely given. And if you find yourself at a crossroads standing in the ruins of something you thought would last forever, know this. Endings are also beginnings. The door that closes behind you opens onto a path you never knew existed. Walk it. See where it leads. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you exactly who they are. And the greatest gift you can give yourself is believing them the first time and choosing to walk away. Thank you for listening to my story today. If this touched something in your heart, if you have ever had to find the courage to leave someone who did not see your worth, I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your experience. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. If this video resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need this message. And if you are not already subscribed, join our community so you never miss a story. We are all in this together, learning and growing and finding our way. Until next time, take care of yourselves. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of respect. Never forget that.